Clubbers, this is the moment we have been waiting for 6 weeks. We are going to bring the author of the book we've been reading. The book is called Tactics. The author we're going to talk to tonight is Greg Koukl. This is something that we have all been so excited about. We are also streaming this feed to YouTube. So YouTube, hi there. Welcome. We're so glad that you're joining us. We want to let you guys know what's been going on for 6 weeks. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're getting to take a sneak peek into a book club that we started a few months ago, actually. The first book we walked through was my book, Another Gospel. And then we were having so much fun, we just decided to keep on going. And we are going to read a new book every 6 weeks or so. So the book we just read was Tactics by Greg Koukl. We're going to talk with Greg in just a moment. And we've got some people here joining us. Hey, everybody. Hi, Eddie. Good to see you here. It's so good to see all of you. Hi from Arizona. Good to see you all joining us on the Facebook. So the Facebook group that this is streaming in is our private book club. And so if you're watching on YouTube, I want to tell you a little bit about this book club because we would love to have you join us for our next book, which, by the way, I am going to reveal at the end of this broadcast. So you will be able to see the book that we're going to be reading after this one. We'll give it about 2 weeks to give people a chance to join the group, and then we're going to bring it back on down to private and close it so that people don't jump in the middle of the book. We'll just get to read through it together. It's been so sweet, such a great experience. Hi there, Candy Can and Sahid. I'm probably saying these names incorrectly, but hi, Sarah from Indiana. Good to see you. Jenica from the Philippines. Mike from Tulsa. Hey, Kristen from Colorado. Got people tuning in from New York and San Antonio. So great to see you all here. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can go to, right now, you can go to facebook.com/groups/Alisa Childers Book Club. Again, that's facebook.com/groups/Alisa Childers Book Club to join us because we're going to start a new book in 2 weeks. We will take 6 weeks to walk through the book, to read through it. We will post discussion questions each week like we did this time. We had some amazing conversations. We analyzed memes. We answered questions about the different tactics we were learning about. And so everybody's been so excited to get to ask their questions to the one and only Greg Koukl. Greg, we are so glad you're here. We've been waiting for this. Yay.
Oh, well, I always have a fabulous time hanging out with you, Alisa. So I'm thrilled to be part of your crowd here and cheering you on too and the great work that you've done with Another Gospel. I always check it out because, whenever I go on Amazon, I'm taking a look to see how Tactics is doing, and you are giving me a run for my money there in the apologetics category, which I'm thrilled. You know that. I am thrilled to be beat by somebody like you and with the tremendous work that you've done. So it's just a lot of fun to hang out a little bit.
Well, we're so glad you're here. This is like a big party. This is so exciting because the build up to this has been so great. Everybody has been so excited to get to ask questions. We have a lot of questions for you, Greg. So we're going to bring those questions. In fact, I want to let you guys know if you're watching in the Facebook group and you have a question for Greg, I mean, that's why Greg is here, is to answer your questions. Okay, this isn't just me interviewing Greg. This is your chance to ask all of your questions. And so if you have a question for Greg, put the word question in all caps in the comments section, and we will be able to scroll through and find your question. Greg will get to answer it. Also, I have a fun little thing planned. As you all know, if you're in the group, we've been kind of analyzing some memes from skeptical sources. Some have been agnostic sources, some have been atheist sources, some have been progressive Christian sources, and we've all gotten to practice the tactics that we've learned with the sentiments we're reading in these memes. So we're going to start the whole thing out tonight with letting Greg tell us what tactic he would use with a particular meme that got quite a bit of traction in the group. This was one that was kind of popular. Everybody was commenting on it and figuring out how to get to the bottom of what this person was saying and how we could have a fruitful conversation with this meme. So, Greg, are you ready? I'm going to read this meme to you.
Yeah, sure. In the hot seat here.
In the hot seat. You can tell us what to do. So the statement is this. And I guess I should tell you where this comes from. This comes from a website that's dedicated to advancing the cause of deconstruction. Okay.
All right.
So that's their cause, is to help people deconstruct in their faith and lead them through that process. So the statement is this: any system or individual who places prerequisites upon your worthiness to exist, pursue your own happiness, and be loved exactly as you are is toxic and harmful. I'm going to read it again. Any
Mm-hmm.
system or individual who places prerequisites upon your worthiness to exist, pursue your own happiness, and be loved exactly as you are is toxic and harmful. This is a sentiment I
Mm-hmm.
hear a lot, Greg. How would you respond to this? What tactic would you use?
Well, I have a feeling that in some ways I'm going to sound like a broken record in our time together because what I always try to do from the outset is to get more information. And so in this situation, I would ask for an example. Something else has occurred to me immediately, and maybe to some of your viewers as well, but I'm not going to go there yet. I see a problem that part of me wants to just jump right on. So I get that if some of you are feeling that. But we want to restrain ourselves and try to get some more information. So I would want that person to give me, this is a what do you mean by that kind of thing. Help me understand this. Give me some examples of the kind of thing that you're condemning here. Okay. Now I'm choosing my language carefully, the kind of thing that you're condemning, because it is a condemnation. And in fact, it's a very aggressive condemnation. It's saying that certain types of behavior are unacceptable because I think the language was toxic, right? Okay, that's a condemnation of an individual who is doing something that they think is reprehensible. So give me some examples. So I'm just going to draw them out and let them give some examples. I have a suspicion they're going to go right to classical Christianity and look at some of the foundational notions of classical Christianity and say, see how bad these things are. Why are they bad? Well, it's anti-gay. And therefore what? Well, that makes gays feel bad. Okay, I'm going along with the language right now. Notice I want them to get more things out on the table. All right. Now, again, I think that some of your regular listeners are probably seeing where I'm going here, but I want them to dig the hole a bit deeper. And I want to ask more questions about this. I want them to give me examples of this kind of thing. And I suspect because it's deconstruction, moving towards progressive Christianity, that I know the kinds of things that are troubling to a person like this. And so once I've asked that question and I get those things out on the table, I'm going to say, if this is something that you think is so damaging and so toxic, then why? Well, maybe I might step in and say, well, you know what? Those things that you are troubled with, I believe those things. So are you saying that I'm guilty of some toxic, abusive behavior here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a question. No, I know the answer to that. And the answer is yes, of course. Okay. My response is going to be, that makes me feel really bad. Why are you doing this to me?
Yeah,
Why are you making me feel bad? Why are you criticizing my behavior? Why are you assaulting my identity as a conservative Christian? In other words, why are you doing the very thing you're telling me not to do?
right.
Now, your viewers are going to recognize that as the suicide tactic. And in this particular case, it's practical suicide. They're engaged in an activity that is doing the very thing that they say I shouldn't be doing. And they're doing it in the process of telling me that I shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah,
But notice what I did instead of jumping in and saying, well, that's self refuting, which would have been an accurate assessment, it seems to me, of that. I let them put more stuff out on the table that I could work with. Then I identify myself as one of those kinds of people so I can personalize the assault. It's not just an assault at those people. Now, this criticism is against me personally
right.
when I identify myself as one of those people. So if I'm doing these things, then you would consider me guilty of this behavior, toxic, abusive behavior. Now they are taking this position against me personally. And now I could say, well, why are you doing what you're telling me I shouldn't be doing with other people?
That's good. Yeah. Well, I got
Suicide
to tell you,
tactic.
this is a really smart group because when I posted this meme, I'm looking at what I said about it. Basically, how would you use your tactics to interact with these ideas? And I
Mm-hmm.
noticed a lot of people using the Columbo tactic, people
Mm-hmm.
saying things like, what do you mean by prerequisite? What is that? What are you referring to when you're talking about
Right.
prerequisites? What is it that allows you to believe this is true? So they were definitely using their Columbo tactics, and there was people saying I would combine several different tactics on this. So they were definitely thinking it through. And I think your answer is great. And it actually reminds me of when I had posted a blog post that was sort of critical of a very popular book that was out at the time. And several people in the comment section had said things like, well, did you reach out to this person first
Right.
before you
Right.
criticized their ideas? And I thought that, I thought about that suicide tactic because I thought, well, did you reach out to me before you posted your criticism of my blog post?
Yes,
Not
that's right. I
really.
mean, this is to me, this is how I want to. I have a reaction to that, and I don't want to be unkind, so I'm trying to. But this is a bit juvenile. All right, it's just a bit juvenile. Here are people who are in public making statements, and they are taking public positions, and so they're influencing people in public. Yet others don't want you to criticize their views in public. They want you to do it in private, as if that's going to somehow make a difference. These are
Right.
public figures, they're public views. They should be engaged in an appropriate way, in a generous and gracious way, but engaged in public. There's nothing. Look, if you don't like the heat, get out of the kitchen is an old saying. You want to get in the discussion, okay? Then don't be patronizing and say I can be a player in this discussion, but don't anybody criticize me publicly because that could really hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if your ideas are good, they'll survive public assessment. Okay, and again, I'm not endorsing any kind of um, unpleasant or abusive kind of responses to
Sure.
people, and on the internet you see a lot of that kind of stuff, but in this particular case, what immediately occurred to me is this is self-refuting in a practical sense, and I want your viewers to notice something though. Most of the tactics are meant to show you how. Most of them, not all of them, meant to show you how an idea goes south.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and but what you do is you use the Columbo tactic in conjunction with the other tactics. So I had suicide help me to see what was wrong, but I didn't just make the point that the view was self-refuting. I used questions to get more information, to get clearer on the idea, just like some of your own viewers have suggested, and this gave me more to work with then,
Yeah.
and then I was able to, in a certain sense, drive the point home, still using a question.
Yeah.
And it's so funny the way you said about a friend, somebody criticized you the way that you described. I had somebody call me on the air, and I was talking about other radio personalities who were off the reservation theologically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this person called me on the air. This is when I was doing live radio for the Crawford Network, and this person said, I think it might even be in the book. He said, "It's not right for you to criticize other Christian teachers on the air."
Hmm.
To which I responded, then why are
Why
you
are you doing
criticizing this Christian teacher on the air?
Yeah,
Notice it
yeah,
was a question, but it
yeah.
was a very obvious example of suicide.
Right, very good. Okay, we got lots of questions coming in. I want to ask you one in particular because I have a feeling some of the questions that we're going to see are going to be in this wheelhouse. And it was something that
Mm-hmm.
came up in the group, and I think it's a valid observation that it's a valid thing to respond to. And some people were concerned as they were reading through the book. They were saying, "Well, does this make me a manipulator? Me learning these tactics and how to ask these questions in these certain ways to kind of steer the conversation in a certain direction. Is
Okay.
that manipulative? Is that something that Jesus wouldn't do, or that we shouldn't do as Christians? So how would you respond to that
Well,
gripe?
the irony is that Jesus did this all the time. Was the baptism of John from God or from men? Now they're stuck. If they say from God, why didn't you believe them? If they say from men, then everybody's going to be mad at them because people like John. So they say, we don't know. We're not going to answer your question. Jesus stuck them right there. He stuck
Mhm.
them. It was very clever. It was very shrewd. Jesus was not manipulating. He was maneuvering. And I think there's a legitimate difference. Manipulation is when you take advantage of a circumstance to accomplish some illicit end, some inappropriate end. If I am taking advantage of a circumstance to show somebody their bad thinking and do it in a shrewd way so that it's compelling, what I've done is I have pointed them more aggressively towards the truth. Now, there are going to be people, and I've heard this complaint before. Oh, you're manipulating. What do you think I should do? Is the question I'm going to ask.
Mm.
Okay, you're going to deal with this challenge. Now, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to try to address it in an effective way. But the minute you try to address it in an effective way, you could always be accused of manipulating.
Yeah.
Manipulation is an illicit way to make a point. Okay, we're maneuvering, and I actually talk about this, I think, in the second chapter of the book. We're not trying to make people look stupid. We're not trying to get points for our side in the sense that, okay, got him or her or whatever. We are trying to make points for the truth, and we're trying to do it in a legitimate fashion. And this is why when I'm kind of in Columbo mode with someone, and I don't always get in that. I mean, I'm still learning too. Sometimes I jump too quickly and start lecturing, so I'm in the learning process as well. But when I'm in Columbo mode, my whole posture is very gentle. It's very genial. It's very amicable. It's interactive. Lots of questions. All
Yeah.
right. Nothing wrong with that at all. People don't seem at all put off by it. But if they get outmaneuvered in a fair way on an issue of important truth, why should I be faulted?
Yeah. Yeah.
And keep in mind, Jesus did it all the time. I
You
think
really did. Yeah.
300 and some was the number. I got that actually from somebody else. I didn't count myself, but it's in the tactics book. We all know that Jesus did it a lot. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't realize he'd asked that many questions. But and Jesus wasn't illicitly manipulative. He did maneuver shrewdly. Hey, for goodness sake, look at him with the woman at the well.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a very artful maneuvering. And the chapter before with Nicodemus, the same thing. Very different style, different circumstance, different person. But he was maneuvering, not manipulating, maneuvering the whole time.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Our first question, for some reason, my software is not showing me the name of the person who is
All
asking this
right.
question. But the question is, how do you reopen the door to talk to a family member who has walked away from the faith? Difficult conversations have happened in the past, pre-tactics, and then there's a face palm emoji there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it depends on the circumstance, okay? And a lot of times I pause about these things because I'm not there looking at the person in question and I'm not cognizant of all of the circumstances. If there has been a bad interaction with somebody in the past, facepalm kind of deal, okay? I don't know if that means the Christians got their hand in the other person's face or the straight arm is coming from the other side, but it's
Mhm.
not a good situation. This is a good reason to mellow out and back off, back way off, at least temporarily. Now, if the Christian in this case has been the one that's been overly aggressive, it's maybe appropriate just to apologize. You know, when we talked about spiritual things in the past, I just have to admit I got nasty, and I'm really sorry for that. I, I'm sorry. Um, however, I mean, I hope that your rejection of my views is not because I was a jerk.
Yeah.
I hope it's because of other reasons that are principled. And I understand how I could have gotten in the way of that. So maybe just a straight up, if it's appropriate, people have to assess their own behaviors. You don't do it if you don't think you are unkind, as that would be manipulative. All right, to say something untrue to get a response.
Right.
But if you were overbearing in a circumstance, it's always appropriate to apologize for whatever individual thing you did wrong. There might be all kinds of fault on the other side as well. You don't address that. You're not talking about them. You're talking about what you did. I can think of times, now this isn't tactical with non-Christians, but where I was way over the top with my girls. And I had to go in and tell my girls, Papa was wrong in the way he expressed himself. I wasn't I wasn't wrong in the point I was making. I was wrong in the way I did it, and I need to apologize for it. Ask your
Mm.
forgiveness for that. So this is something we do with others as well in relationships, and sometimes that'll remove a barrier. Okay.
Yeah.
Another thing to keep in mind, if this relationship has been soured a little bit, I don't try to push very hard on somebody who doesn't want to listen.
That's good.
Um, it's different people have different styles, but if people don't want to listen, I'm not going to try to push the river. However, those people, sooner or later, if we're close to them and we have access to their lives, sooner or later are going to be in a hard spot. And this is where we can be a paraclete, a comforter to them in the Lord. And in those circumstances, when we're there for them, that's when we can pray for them, with them, for them, with them.
Yeah.
Can I pray for you? I'm just going to pray for you. Is that all right with you? I know this is a really hard situation. Then you pray from your heart a prayer regarding that person, that circumstance. This can be very, very powerful in a person's life, even when they're resistant uh, to the gospel in general. There's these existential moments, these personal moments where, for all we know, God has ordained for them to face the crisis of their own life, and you're there with a graceful hand, and with the right answers as is appropriate. So, I mean, it's a tough situation,
Yeah.
and it's not like a silver bullet for that, but that might be something to keep in mind.
Very good. All right, next question is how can we talk to people on social media? A friend mentioned she bought all of Rachel Hollis's books. She and I used to attend church. I told her to throw away the books and I gave reasons to watch for progressive Christians. My friend had friends on her Facebook page start to jump on me. Do I respond?
Uh, yeah, good question. Sometimes when I'm not exactly sure the situation of the friend who this Facebook user told to throw her books away. That might sometimes if we come on real aggressive, like throw that out, burn it, it works. It's really good. Really? Is that bad? Fine. Other times it creates a huge defensive response. It sounds to me like the defensive response came from other Facebook users. And in this circumstance, I think all you can do is give the reasons why you think they're a problem. Okay, what is the danger here? And the danger is this, this, and this. I don't know the comments that the Facebook users in response made. I don't know what they made. And so if there's substance or they're just name calling or whatever. And if it's all this noise, this rhetorical noise, this is a good place to ask a question. And that it has to do with why are you attacking me, or what is the
Hmm.
problem with what I've said, or well, you put this person down. Well, I think they're wrong. How do you think I should express myself if I
Yeah.
think somebody's wrong? You think I'm wrong, and you're expressing yourself in public towards me in this venue. Why is it wrong for me to do that? And so this is another potentially suicide circumstance, and you want to draw attention to it with your questions and ask, okay, where is the place for me to warn my friend of something I think is dangerous? Where is that place? Help me out here, and then
Hmm.
see what they say. Facebook is sometimes, I don't use social media. Okay. It's just not my deal. I'm too old for that. I have, I mean, it's a kind of a necessary evil in a lot of ways, but now people are seeing the problems with it and the way things get manipulated and whatever social media. But I do think it's a great opportunity to communicate. Stand to reason we do all the stuff, but somebody else manages, not me. The liability is two things. One, you're not face to face with a person talking with them, and because of the screen, people end up acting towards others in a way they would never act or speak if they were actually eyeball to eyeball with someone in their
Hmm.
presence. Okay. So it brings out the worst in people, I guess. And this
Yeah.
is something we have to guard against ourselves. I've been so embarrassed when I've seen the things that people defending Christianity have said and the way they've acted. It's just grotesque. They can't get the the best shot in. It's like a gladiator event. They're not able to draw blood, so then they just get nasty.
Hmm.
And it's not a gladiator event. That's not my approach. It shouldn't be any Christian's approach. It's our opportunity to try to speak the truth in love, and but do it persuasively and do it shrewdly,
Yeah.
maneuvering, not manipulating. So that's a liability, I think, of using social media. But keep in mind too, just another thought. So similar when a Christian does a debate with a non-Christian and there's an audience. Um, I never have it as a goal to persuade my opponent in a debate. I mean, they're public with their views. They've written books. They're not going to change their mind after
Yeah.
2 hours of conversation in front of a crowd. The people I'm speaking to are the ones that are listening. And so keep in
That's
mind that
so
when you
good.
have an interaction on Facebook or anywhere in social media, there are lots of people that are listening in, and they're not just weighing your words, they're weighing your behavior, your temperament, the way you
Hmm.
engage. And so being virtuous is not just good manners, it's also effective, persuasive speech when you are gracious to other people when they're not gracious to you. So just a side
Yeah,
remark on that.
that's really good stuff. And I think that you've made a couple of points that are really important to bring out because, number one, especially on social media, I used to duke it out in the comments when I had more time on my hands. I don't really do that anymore,
No,
but
no time anymore.
I
That's
don't have
why.
time to duke it out. I love that other people come and they all duke it out together. That's great. That's why I'm here. Provide a platform for people to do that. But that's a great point you make because when I used to do that, I was almost never trying to change the mind of the person I was interacting with.
Mhm.
When I would choose to interact in the comments, it was typically to help the people who were reading all the comments to
Right.
analyze and think through things for themselves, realizing, of course, a lot of people
Mhm.
are not going to like what I say, no matter what it is I say or how I say it. But for the people who are open, who really want, they want this truth, they want to know how to think through this, then I'm trying to model things for them. And so, especially when it comes to Facebook and in social media, when somebody posts something, particularly a book that they like, we have to bear in mind that they've posted this book because there's something about that book that has really reached their heart. There's
Mhm.
something they read in that book they resonated with deeply, they connected with it. And so we have to be kind of careful to not just come on and because it could feel like we're stomping on their heart because this is
Right.
something that they were touched by. So one thing
Nicely
I have
put.
found effective, especially especially when someone shares a book, this is a great way to interact. Is maybe send a private message, acknowledge something positive about the book, like, hey, I've heard that this is really resonating with a lot of people. I understand. Hey, here's a review that Alisa Childers wrote on this book, and just if you want to consider another perspective or maybe bring some a rounded response to it. If you want to consider that, here's an article you can read. There are a lot of great, not just ones I've written, but there are a lot of great reviews out there that you can share with somebody without kind of coming right at them from the front. And I have actually found that to be really effective. I've had people actually respond back to me and say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll check it out. Thanks. And then you
Mhm.
just leave it in their hands if they want to respond further. But social media is tough. And we have another question about social media and
Before
kind of
we get to
how,
that, can I just add a
yes,
postscript
please.
to what you said? I think this is a question that Frank Turek uses a lot, but the way he does it is a little. I mean, if you know Frank, he's in New Jersey. You want a piece of me,
Yeah.
that kind of guy. But I think it can be asked in different ways, and the way he asks it is this: is if I could show you that Jesus was the rose from the dead and was who he claimed to be, would you follow him? Okay, very direct and very aggressive. Okay, he's on a college campus, the atmosphere, whatever. But I think there can be a variation of that in the circumstance here. Somebody reads this book and they're real excited and they post something about it. And I think a question could be posed. I'm curious. I understand why you like the book, but when it comes to these spiritual matters, are you committed to the idea? Are you interested in finding out what the truth is?
Mm,
Are you interested in that? Okay. Sure. I mean, I think a lot of people would respond that way. Okay. I'm concerned, I'm concerned that this book does not give you that. Would you like
mm,
to hear the reasons why? Okay. Notice how these are still questions that I'm using to get an entree. I'm looking for a response. Basically, I'm getting, yes, I am. And yes, I'm giving you permission to tell me why instead of us just piling on.
very good.
It's just like a soft entry kind of thing. Doing the same thing that Frank does, just in a gentler way, and asking permission in that. And a lot of people are going to accept that. And then now you have an opportunity to, in a more calm way, um, do what they've just, in a sense, asked you to do or given you permission to do, point out some of the concerns and why you don't think this thing tells the truth about the things. Not that the person is lying, but the person is mistaken
Yeah,
for this reason. And these things matter. Just a thought.
it's good. Very good. Okay, this question is I find that using tactics doesn't work so well on social media because the other person has all the time in the world to think of a response. What do you suggest?
Well, that may not be a bad thing. It's actually a plus for the Christian because they don't have to be quick on their feet. All right. And if you have time to compose a response a little bit and think through it a little and maybe check a book or whatever and edit. I mean, this is what I do. I edit every single thing I post anywhere, even my emails. I mean, even my tweets. No, even my text messages, everything. And because I want to be careful how I say things, even in casual conversation. And when you're in social media, you have an opportunity to do that. Get a Word doc or whatever and write this thing out and make it just so, and then post it. All right. And then once it's posted, guess what? The other person has the opportunity to do the same thing. Now, I know this might feel at first like a liability because, well, they can think about it. Well, that's what you want them to do. They can think about it. Well, they can compose a response to me that might be better than they'd think of off the top of their head. Well, yeah, probably, but so what? May the best idea win.
Yeah,
Let them have their opportunity to voice their view in as careful a way as possible, and then you get a chance to respond.
yeah,
This isn't. Let me just reinforce something that I mentioned earlier. This is not a gladiator event. We are not trying to find clever ways to draw blood. And this is the way lots of people embrace these kinds of things. I almost said play this game because for them it's like that. It's a game. It's a gladiator event. Who's quicker on the draw? Who can draw first blood? Who can down their opponent? That's not what we do.
it's good.
And so if the other person needs extra time to flesh out their thing, great. Okay, now you got a clearer picture. That's what we ask. What do you mean by that? To get a clearer picture of their view.
Yeah,
No
very
problem.
good. Okay, here's a good question. Not controversial at all. How do you deal with the current trend in teaching that logic should be dismissed as whiteness? Do you just pass on conversations with these persons who dismiss all logic and reason? Because actually,
Well,
and I would add this too, it's not just people claiming whiteness that would reject logic and reason. In the progressive Christian world, there are a lot of postmodern moral
right,
relativists that
right.
are going to reject that as well. So, how would we approach that?
Okay, well, this is there's a the problem here. It seems to be obviously suicide. All right, because the question I would ask here is why would you think that something like using careful thinking is an example of whiteness? Now, notice I'm asking them for the reasons for their statement. That's Columbo number two, right? But they're going to take the bait. They're going to give you the reasons. The minute they use reasons, give reasons, they are employing a reasonable, rational, logical enterprise
Yeah.
to explain to you while their view is a correct one and yours is maybe false. You human. This is inside out tactic. If you think about the new book, because that's a chapter that's in the 10th anniversary edition. Human beings are made in the image of God, and they must live in God's world. That is the fact of the matter. And therefore, there are certain things that are built into them that they cannot consistently deny or ignore. They can say they deny it, like, well, logic is right. And then they give you the logical reasons why their view is right. Okay. So, on the one hand, they are making a claim that is consistent with their worldview, CRT or critical race theory or something like that. And then on the other hand, they are speaking as a human being made in the image of God in such a way that contradicts what they're just claiming in this, what turns out to be a false worldview.
Yeah.
And they can't not do that. It's like moral relativists who say there is no objective morality. It's all a matter of opinion. Therefore, you're wrong for
Right.
pushing your morality on me. That's like saying there are no moral rules. Here's one. It's,
Exactly.
but they can't help from doing that, Alisa. They can't, because they're human beings made in the image of God. And so our task is kind of to watch that and then to question them about the process. Now I'm really confused. No way. So when you are telling me the reasons why logic is whiteness, you're using a reason and rationale. H- Is that reason and rationale you're using a product of the influence of whiteness in your own life,
Yeah.
or are you actually right on this claim? And by the way, why would you say that? I mean, this to me is such an absurd. Pardon me, but it's just such an absurd statement. Okay, logic is like the reason. r- It's like saying I'm trying to parody this a little bit, but if I try to parody it, there's two problems. One, looks like I'm making fun of it, and I don't want to do that. Um, and secondly, if you try to parody something, the parody becomes fact. It becomes true in a couple of weeks or months. The
Mm.
thing that was an extreme example of parody, people start doing it and they think it's normal. So, it's like saying that 2 + 2 is 4. You think so? That's because you have dogs as pets.
Right.
Huh? What is the connection between math and the fact that I have what if I had no dogs? Wouldn't 2 + 2 still be 4? Wouldn't the law of non-contradiction still be legitimate if in Africa, where most people are black, how does that change? I Computers work on zeros and ones, all
Yeah.
right? That's it. Open and close, okay? Can't be both, can't be neither. It's either or. And if it wasn't the case, if logic was just a cultural convention, computers wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Logic
That's
isn't a
true.
cultural convention. It's a feature of the world, the way the world actually it's the way reality is structured.
Yeah.
But this becomes a way. I'm not using tactics right now, but I'm just trying to give an insight. This becomes a way for people to dismiss things they don't like that work against them, but only dismiss them when they work against them. They are not dismissing them when they work in their favor. They use them all the time when they work in their favor.
Yeah.
And so there's radical inconsistency. I actually don't think most even see this. And
Yeah.
this is why using questions to try to help people to see the kind of foolishness of what they've just said.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me of what I'm sort of really deep into right now. So I'm currently working on my next book, and as part of my research for this next book, I've been reading about some of the postmodern thinkers from the 60s that kind of came along with this whole deconstruction movement, Jacques Derrida and people like that.
Derrida,
And
right?
Derrida,
Lyotard.
he didn't think that words could be pinned down to singular and definite meanings, and he was criticizing the idea that
So great.
objective truth could be found through language. And I mean, I'm not a philosopher, but I'm reading this going, he's using words
Of course.
to give us all of this information that he expects, and he would even say that, for him, the intention of the author doesn't outweigh the interpreter's, how the interpreter interprets the meaning. But I would
Right.
assume that he would expect everyone reading his work to interpret it as he intended it to be understood. And so
Yes,
you find yourself in this, like, am I
I
just in
know.
crazy town? I don't understand.
Yeah, yes, you are somewhat in crazy town. We're all somewhat in crazy town because this kind of thing happens all the time. And these are all profoundly self-refuting notions. And these people, like Derrida, for example, these are brilliant people. It doesn't mean that they can't make foolish, amateuristic mistakes in thinking, especially when it comes to spiritual things. And I've said this many, many times. Even intelligent people make common mistakes when it comes to spiritual things. And sometimes not so clever folk can see it right away. Ordinary folks see this stuff a mile off and they can't figure out, well, why don't they see that? Well, he's so smart. He must be right and I must be wrong. No, most of these things when you apply common sense, you can figure this out. And you just did it. I'm no philosopher, but I mean, it seems to me he's communicating something in words. And if I said that what he does is he's condemning all black people in his writing, he would be angry and say, "You are
That's
misrepresenting
right.
my view." Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm a reader. According to your view, I can make up any definition, any meaning I want. If that's what I'm getting, why not? And he would have no legitimate recourse in a
Right.
situation like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next question is, how do you respond to a friend who tells you that she no longer believes in God and that he no longer has a plan for her life?
Well, if there is no God, he can't have a plan for her life. My question would be, why is it that you no longer believe in God? That's a very simple question. That's Columbo number 2. All right. Or maybe Columbo number 1, what do you mean by that? Could be more. You think that God doesn't exist. Why is that? And see what she says. By the way, there's a lot of parents who've told me, I raised my kid a good Christian and now they're an atheist and I don't know what to do. I said, well, did you ever ask them why they don't believe in Christianity anymore and why they don't believe in God? I mean, a lot of them, that's never occurred to them. Now, in a circumstance like that, and my eldest daughter is not a Christian. And just saying here, it's not a big secret. I've talked about it on the air before, but I know that I made some big mistakes when she was transitioning out. Okay. And so when you are dealing with somebody close to you who is having questions like this or is come to opposite conclusions of what you have, you really have to tread lightly. And one of the things I said on the air recently, because my daughter's 16 now, is that what's more important, because a gentleman called me with a similar kind of circumstance. And I said to him, I think what's more important right now, what's most important is not that you convince your daughter of your view, but you convince your daughter of your love. And see, that's
Wow.
been my MO now for the last couple of years. And not to argue, not to say she's wrong. I'm not going, those words will not mean anything to her in this relationship if she doesn't believe that I actually love her. It's
Mm.
just the way it works. And so if somebody no longer believes in God, it's fair to ask them why. Tell me about it. you know
Yeah.
Not angrily, but tell me, why don't you believe in God? But let me offer an insight here, something that I've been using a lot lately. And I think it's really helpful here. And that is a simple question. I wrote a mentoring letter about it, like a one-page deal that we send out through Stand to Reason a number of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. And that is asking the question, what's the alternative? What's the alternative? Because whenever you reject one worldview, you have to go somewhere else. So if you say there is no God, that means you've moved from a theistic worldview to an atheistic worldview. Okay. So I ask, well, why do you reject God? Because there's so much evil in the world. There is a lot of evil in the world. Okay. So now you're an atheist. All right. Yeah. So how do you solve that problem now? Because the problem of evil, for example, is not something that goes away when you stop believing in God. All of the evil that you saw in the world that caused you to distrust the existence of God is still there. So
Yeah.
now you've adopted a new worldview. Tell me how atheism helps you better make sense of the problem of evil than theism does. And the problem, and people do not think about that. They
That's
think
true.
that
Yeah,
they've
I've never
solved the
heard anyone
problem.
pose that question, actually.
Yeah. They think they've solved the problem. It's actually I asked this question in The Story of Reality, another book that I've written on this, the broader Christian worldview. But the question I think is fair. What's the alternative? Okay. Now I think that there are problems with Christianity. I think there are problems with every worldview. I think there's a problem with every idea and every person. It's because that's the human condition. We have an ability to know accurately lots of things, but there are a lot of problems with knowing as well. You know, but Christianity has a lot fewer outliers than any other view. And it makes the most sense of the world as we experience it, as we know it to be. If I'm going to be an atheist, I'm going to have to deny the problem of evil because the problem of evil depends on the fact that there are laws in the universe out there that are being broken, which amounts to the evil in the world. But if there's no lawmaker, there's no laws. If there's no laws, there's no broken laws. If there are no broken laws, there is no evil. There's just a bunch of stuff that you may not like, but why should anybody care what you like if there's no obligation to be nice to people and care what other people like?
Yeah.
If it's just molecules clashing, this is a huge problem for atheism. And I addressed this with one atheist who called me on my own show, and he said, "Well, evolution is what explains um, morality." Well, I don't think it's capable of doing it, but let's just take it at face value. So now what you're saying when you complain about evil in the world or about the evil things you think God did in the Bible, you're saying that your evolution disagrees with those things. And he said, yes. I said, I'll rest my case. Why should anybody care what your evolution tells you?
Yeah.
Maybe Mao Zedong's evolution told him something different.
Right.
But the thing is, people are made in the image of God. They live in God's world. They know there's a problem of evil and they know it's out there. It's
Mm.
not just a belief you have because of evolution, it's real out there. Christianity can make sense of that. Atheism can't even make sense of that. That's the alternative. That's better. So this doesn't mean we've solved the problem of evil. Still needs to be answered. But when we ask the question, what's the alternative? This helps us to weigh worldviews in relationship to each other and ask, well, which one has the most explanatory power given the problem we're facing? And I think the problem of evil is great.
Yeah.
I love it as a Christian. I don't love evil, but I like the issue because it so powerfully verifies our worldview.
Hmm.
Our whole story is about the problem of evil. It starts in chapter 3 and doesn't get fixed until 66 books later. We wouldn't have Christianity if there was no problem of evil.
Yeah.
We
That's
can make
good.
sense of it. We have a solution, but atheists can do neither.
Yeah.
What's the alternative is the question. Okay.
Very good. We're going to get to some more questions. Before we do that, Greg, I want to read you some of the comments people are leaving, just thanking you for
Hmm.
writing this book and for just giving us the opportunity to talk with you tonight. So, one comment here says, really grateful for your book. It has really helped me to interact with others who disagree with me on all subjects and levels. I really appreciate that.
Hmm.
Someone else here is saying, where did it go? Struggling, people expressing that they struggle with practicing this in real life situations, but they're going to work on this. This is something that's
Yeah,
encouraged them to be
that's
working
good.
on it.
I'm working on it too. So
Yeah,
that's all part
we
of the
all are, aren't
program.
we?
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's lots of people just leaving thank yous to you for writing this book
Hmm.
and just letting you know how much that this has impacted them and really helped them, and they're going to be practicing these tactics. For the YouTube people watching, I just want to remind you that you can join our group, but I will tell you a couple things about the group. So this is a group for like-minded Christians. So there are lots of different groups on Facebook that have different purposes. Some have the great aim and goal of engaging in really robust debates over theological issues and debates between atheists and Christians and all that. And that's all wonderful, but every group has a different purpose. Our group is for like-minded Christians to come together to learn and grow in our faith as we read through some of these books. So because of that, there are a couple of belief statements that we ask you to agree to. And that's just mainly because we want to all be on the same page. We don't want to be fighting over Christianity versus atheism or Christianity versus progressive Christianity. So if that's something you're interested in, go to facebook.com/groups/Alisa Childers Book Club. We're opening it back up and we are starting a new book, which I'm going to reveal in just a few minutes. But we're going to get back to some questions here with Greg. So Greg, this question is, how do you respond to someone who doesn't believe the entire Bible, but only the words of Jesus?
Well, if somebody only believes the words of Jesus, that's really great,
Yes.
because the words of Jesus cover a lot of ground. Okay. One of the unusual things about the words of Jesus, though, is that they give a lot of the bad news, but Jesus is quite lean on the good news. Most of the things that he says are meant to talk about the problems that people are facing with coming to God, dealing with hypocrisy, dealing with pride, that kind of thing. And he addresses that. Somebody I talked to who mentioned to me before he was a Christian, he'd heard the Gospels. Well, that's good news. And he said, I read the Gospels. I saw a lot of bad news. That's because Jesus pours the bad news on. He really makes people struggle with their own inability to satisfy God's law. Remember when he talked to the lawyer and gave the Good Samaritan parable? That is not a morality parable. That's not the purpose. The lawyer wanted to know, what do I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said, well, what do the commandments say? Well, the lawyer, who is an expert in the law, cited the two great commandments. And Jesus said, great, do this and you'll live. But the text says, seeking to justify himself, he asks, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus tells about the Good Samaritan. The purpose of Jesus telling about the Good Samaritan was to show this very legalistic person that if you want to satisfy the demands of the law, you have to love your greatest enemy more than you love yourself. That's what is required. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. This is what Jesus was saying. Okay. So I like the red words. That's fine. And in fact, there was a time when I was first a Christian where I flirted with that a little bit. Okay. But I had to ask the question then. And what I'm saying now is, if that's all they're going to go with, that's plenty to make our case for Christianity. Okay. But I have to ask the question that goes to kind of a consistency question. Who wrote those words about Jesus? Okay. Well, these are Jesus' followers who wrote the words of Jesus, but it's these same followers who Jesus personally trained to follow after them. Okay. This is a very important phrase. Those people, Peter, John, James. Now, James comes after the resurrection, because that was Jesus' half brother, but still he is part of the apostolic band. Then Paul, who was personally trained by Jesus, even though he wasn't part of the earthly band of Jesus before the resurrection. Paul describes his own training by Jesus, and then he took his message to the elders, so to speak, the pillars, and they affirmed his message. But see, these guys are all trained by Jesus. So why would you believe the words of Jesus written by the people who are trained by Jesus, but you wouldn't believe the words of those people who are trained by Jesus?
That's good.
Seems to be an inconsistency there.
Yeah.
If they're reliable to accurately record the things that Jesus said, then why aren't they reliable to be trusted in the things that maybe Jesus didn't speak directly to, at least in the record, but they are offering, probably because Jesus spoke to that off the record, as it were. I mean, the Gospels aren't everything Jesus said. It's like when people say, well, Jesus never said anything about homosexuality. How do you know that? We don't know what Jesus spoke about. We only have a very limited record of what he said. Okay, so it might be that he spoke. But we have these guys that were taught by him that are adding more material. So why wouldn't we trust that? if we trust what they wrote about what Jesus actually said? I think it's a fair question,
It
you know.
is. It's a good
And by the
question.
way, nobody has to accept inerrancy to be able to trust the substance of what these guys wrote about spiritual things having been taught by Jesus. Okay. Look, I have books on all kinds of different things. I got fishing books here. I got books on gardening. I got whatever woodworking books. None of these are written by God. They're not inerrant, but they tell me really good, accurate, sound, reliable things about the crafts that to which they speak. So I don't think we should fight inerrancy battles with non-Christians. I think we should just make the point that we have good reasons to believe that these books reflect what Jesus actually taught. And these other books, well, these are written by people who Jesus taught. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't we trust their take on Jesus um, if we trust what Jesus had to say? So, without crossing the inerrancy bridge, we can still look at these things and say, oh, if we can trust the red stuff, we could probably trust the other stuff as well, because these guys were trained personally for 3.5 years by the guy who wrote the red stuff, who gave us the red stuff.
Yeah, it's kinda like cumulative, you're sort of making a case building upon, like, bricks. It'd be tough
Right.
to start with an atheist saying, "Okay, you have to affirm that the Bible is inerrant," and you just get off on a fight over that, but if you can just kinda put that to the side and say, "Okay, I believe the Bible's inerrant, we can talk about that later." But let's look at these as historical documents, even as
Right.
some atheist scholars will acknowledge that these are generally telling the truth about history and what
Yeah.
happened at that time. So let's look at
Bart
what was
Ehrman.
said. You know,
Bart
yeah, Bart
Ehrman
Ehrman.
says
That's
that,
right. Yeah,
you know, a great critic of Christianity, but written a book about the historical Jesus, and he's drawing from the primary
that's
source
right.
documents, which are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
That's right. Here's another great comment for you. Greg, I learned so much from your book, not just about tactics, but to listen more and give people my full attention. So I think that
Hmm.
that's a nice comment. Here's another question.
It
This is a
is.
good question. This is, when do we know when to shake the dust off of our feet, like in Matthew 10:14, and move on?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's not always clear with friends or family that have progressed in ideologies that could become potentially dangerous. When do we walk away, if at all?
Well, I do talk about in the book in the steamroller tactic that some not everybody deserves an answer, and those are abusive people. And Jesus warned against them. He said, "Don't throw what is holy to dogs. Don't throw your pearls to swine." He's speaking in metaphors there, but the point is a good one. You have very precious things that you're offering to people, and some people will engage. That's good. Other people are just going to trample it underfoot, and that's when Jesus says, "I didn't don't worry about them." Now, the "shake the dust off your feet" phrase is actually repeated in Matthew 10. It's a couple of places where you see that. In Matthew 10, when he sends the disciples out on a short-term mission trip, and he said, "If they receive what you have to say, fine. If they don't, then just leave. It's okay." Um, in the end of John chapter 6, the bread of life discourse, very important discourse in Jesus' life, he made statements about himself that really turned people off, and a whole bunch of people left. That was right in the middle of his ministry. That was the end of his period of popularity, and the disciples, many of his disciples left too. And Jesus asked his closer group, "Are you going to go?" And Peter says, "Well, where are we going to go? You have the words that give eternal life." Now, he probably didn't understand very much what Jesus talked about. He was probably like, What's up with that? Eat my flesh, drink my blood." But he says, the fact is, you're the guy. We know that. What's interesting to me, in part, about that is Jesus did not fight with people to stay. He told the truth, and he let the truth lay there, and he let people make their decisions. We are going to be talking to loved ones and people that are important in our life, and they're just going to walk away. Okay. And I think for the time, we just shake off the dust off our feet. Now, that doesn't mean we do that in front of them, like, "Okay, be gone, to hell with you," literally. That was my attitude when I was a young Christian. I even said that kind of stuff, to people. It was not very nice. However, there may be other opportunities when you'll be able to revisit these things. When my younger brother Mark first talked to me about Christ, it was probably 2 years before I became a Christian. And there were a lot of times in between, and I completely brushed him off. I did not take him seriously until there was a time in my life when, by the grace of God, I started looking more closely at the claims of Jesus. And that's when things began to change for me in the summer of 1973. So we never know when someone is gone for good. Okay. Sometimes we break off the argument when they get abusive, or it just seems like they're not interested anymore, or that we've kind of run the gamut. If I'm talking to somebody, even who's interested, I try not to give them too much information. I don't want them to be tired at the end of the conversation. I want them to stay hungry. So I'll give them some stuff to think about, and then I'll say, okay, that's enough for now. And then I move on. Maybe we'll have another chance to talk, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good. Good advice. So maybe we have time for a couple more. So here's a good one. This one is, how should we truly witness to people using tactical insight, yet Paul says he came in the power of God, not the wisdom of men? Is caution needed in apologetics regarding being spirit-led?
Yeah, I think this is a misunderstanding of Paul. Now I know where this comes from. This comes from 1 Corinthians, and there is this absolutely indispensable, vital role of the Holy Spirit. I talk about this in chapter 2. However, Paul was the one who wrote that. It's interesting to go through the book of Acts, and you can just speed read it quickly until you find, well, Paul doesn't show up until chapter 7 or 8 or so, maybe chapter 9, and just see what Paul actually did when he was communicating the gospel. What did he say? How did he comport himself? Well, Paul was in the power of the Holy Spirit, but that didn't exclude the using arguments, using reason, using that kind of thing. In fact, he used it all the time. And as was Paul's custom, he went and reasoned with them in the synagogue, for example. That's for Jews, so he's reasoning from the scriptures. But when he goes to the Gentiles, he's not using scriptures. He's using Epicurean philosophers and Stoic philosophers, and he's quoting them, and he's grabbing something from them that's useful to him, and he's making his case for Jesus. And then he proclaims the truthfulness of Jesus as the Messiah, based on the resurrection from the dead. That's an apologetic. That's a defense. He rose from the dead. So there you go. So if we are saying Paul emphasized the role of the Holy Spirit in 1 Corinthians, then in the opening chapters, therefore arguments and apologetics are damaging or inappropriate, well, then Paul didn't understand his own words the way that reader is understanding them, because Paul didn't append apologetics. He used them. Okay. Now, I do think that we can sometimes have a distorted attitude about those things, thinking that if I'm just clever enough, then I can get people to believe. No, you're not going to be clever enough to do that. There's too many things going against you. You know, I can think of 4 verses that says that say that the non-believer's mind is completely blinded by the devil. Period. You know, they're held captive by him to do their will. They're blind. He's blinded the minds of unbelievers. They can't see, et cetera, you know. So that alone, forget about the flesh and rebellious people. You got the devil against you, right? We're not going to be able to overcome those obstacles. Only the Holy Spirit can do that. But what we do is use means like loving people, like preaching the gospel, and giving good arguments that the Holy Spirit uses to make a difference. We should always have the attitude, like Paul talks about there in 1 Corinthians, that we need the Holy Spirit to make the difference. Okay. I actually think that in that passage, it's the content of the message, not the way he persuades people that he's speaking of, because the idea that of the gospel, God becoming a man to rescue man through sacrificially dying for men and rising from the dead, that's dumb to Greeks and Jews. In fact, in the Areopagus, they were fine listening to Paul until he talked about the resurrection of the dead. Then they started to scoff. Oh, that's stupid. That's dumb. So Paul is saying, I'm not speaking the wisdom of the age, their ideas. I'm speaking the wisdom of God. And they're not going to, they think it's dumb, but it's not. It's it's wisdom. It's the true wisdom. And he does make that point in First Corinthians there in that passage that we're talking about. So but he used rationale reasons all the time.
Yeah. Just lots more comments coming in, thanking you for the book and how much it's helping them to learn how to
That's
just
great.
navigate these conversations better. There's so many great ones. I was looking for this one question because I thought this would be a fun one to end on. And I've lost the question, but I think I can remember the gist of it. This will be fun and it won't be controversial at all. But
Okay.
it said, so Greg is a Calvinist and Alisa is an Arminian. Like, do you guys ever talk about that? Or something
No,
along
I
those
didn't even
lines.
know that about you. So
Well, I don't identify myself as an Arminian. So I am sort of like when people ask me that question, I'll say, I'm a non-Calvinist, but I don't have a label. And the only reason I'm a non-Calvinist is I just, and we actually have, you got old timers. You don't remember that we have talked about this.
okay. All right.
Excuse me. But so I sometimes feel like Tuesdays and Wednesdays I'm a Calvinist, and then I'm a
Uh-huh.
non-Calvinist the rest of the week. So I'm still trying to figure it all out.
Sure.
But I think that I don't know how you would respond to that because you work with a lot of non-Calvinists, Arminians, Molinists. Uh,
Yeah, actually, most of the people that I know and actually draw from are not reformed. And just making a distinction in words here, a Calvinist is somebody who follows John Calvin's theology, just like a Lutheran follows Luther's theology. Uh, Calvin's theology is broadly called Reformed, but you can have people who are Reformed who are not strict Calvinists. So I call myself Reformed. And what I mean by that specifically, I'm not confessional. That is, I don't hold all the standard Reformed um, details of my theology. I don't believe in infant baptism, for example, and I'm not covenant in my theology or general approach. But I do, when it comes to the issue of soteriology or salvation, I believe in sovereign grace. And so the reason I believe in sovereign grace is that I think that's what Scripture teaches. I mean, it's just there's too many verses that I cannot what's the word I'm looking reconcile with a full-on full-throated libertarian free will view like Bill Craig.
right.
Okay, and Bill is Dr. William Lane Craig. I mean, he does a very artful job of characterizing in philosophic ways using middle knowledge and stuff like that of how he works these things out. But I don't think the way he characterizes Molinism as a means of explaining election fits the scriptural description of election, which is why I'm not a Molinist. So, but you're right. I mean, I'm thinking here, the three men that have influenced my life the most are C.S. Lewis, Francis Schaeffer, and J.P. Moreland. One is Reformed, the other two isn't. Schaeffer was Reformed, but not
Was he?
Lewis.
I don't think I knew that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Yeah, he started. I think he was instrumental in starting the uh, I think PCA or one of the Presbyterian branches, a Presbyterian Church of America or something like that. Yeah, he was definitely reformed, but the other two clearly, J.P. Moreland is not, but that doesn't. So what? I
yeah,
never get any talks with him about this, and it doesn't impair my ability to receive from him at
yeah,
all. And I have just tremendous love and respect for Jay. And anyway, and it's true for Bill Craig too. He's been tremendously helpful for me. He's one of the most
yeah,
elegant thinkers that I've ever known. But I disagree on some of those things, so
yeah,
no worries.
yeah.
Yeah,
Very
and
good.
maybe one of these days we'll have a more thoroughgoing
Yeah.
conversation about this
Well, it was
off
at
the air.
CIA a couple of years ago, and we had there was like 2 or 3 days where it was like I don't engage on this a lot, but I was like, "All right, give me your best shot." Like, just give me your best shot.
So we did have that
Yeah, we
conversation.
did.
Okay. Yeah.
It was good. You were, you got me maybe a little closer. I don't know, but we'll see. I
Hmm.
think I'm
Yeah.
just I don't like labels generally,
Hmm.
anyway. So I just try to do what the Bible says as best I can, and I think
Yeah.
that's what we're all trying to do. So
So, but you feel okay about Trinitarian?
Yeah, oh, yes. Well, and the reason, and I'll just say this, the reason I'm not a Molinist is because, I mean, Molinism makes sense to me, makes a lot of sense to me, but I'm really committed to divine simplicity and classical theism.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and those contradict, so
Interesting.
can't go
Yeah.
there. But, that's where I'm at. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be Calvinist in 10 years or Reformed or, I don't like Reformed because I mean, all of us Protestants essentially are Reformed, right?
Well, that word does refer to sovereign grace when it's
Yes, it
commonly
does.
used in
Yes.
theological circles. So we're Protestants, so it's part of the Reformation, and that was the classical understanding of salvation during the Reformation. Lutherans and Calvinists, Reformed alike, held that. But it's an open question to a lot. America was founded mostly by Calvinists. Puritans were all
Yeah.
Calvinists,
Yeah.
Reformed, if you will. So that's our tradition, and then over the years it's changed some, but that's okay. It's an interesting conversation. I don't like when people get snooty about these things
Yeah.
and it makes a big deal about it, and make a fuss. I mean, we're on the same team here and we have differences that are important differences, but they ought not divide us,
Yeah.
in my view.
I agree. I agree. And I've learned a lot from Reformed scholars and thinkers,
Mm.
and I have hold them in the highest esteem. So,
Hmm.
Greg, as we close out, as we're about to let you go, but what do you want to leave us with? And we have spent 6 weeks. See, everybody in this group kind of feels like they know you. We've spent 6 weeks
Oh,
reading through your book,
that's
discussing
so
each
sweet.
chapter, and role playing some of the tactics. What do you want to leave everybody with as we close out our
Well,
tactics session?
yeah, this is a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. And it has to do with, and I was talking to Amy Hall and my young guns, I call them on our team, um, about this the other day. I think the church is moving into a phase right now where, and I have a lot of reasons for thinking this, things are going to get really, really hard for Christians. And apologetics and making the case is still going to be important, but I think we're moving more into a phase of standing firm for the truth as opposed to making lots of inroads. In the Jesus movement, man, there's all kinds of inroads that the Holy Spirit made, bringing people to Christ. I mean, this is almost 50 years ago, but I mean, that for an example, okay. And we see also in the early church, all this movement there in the early part of the Book of Acts. But then things got tough, and then it was persecution, and then the pickings got slimmer, and the going got tougher. Okay, I never put it that way before. I should probably write it down.
Mm.
But the pickings got slimmer and the going got tougher. And I think this is what's going to happen here. And so I don't think we're going to, my personal opinion, I don't think we're going to convince a lot of progressives to come back to the fold. I think what we're going to have to do is stand tall theologically against that and firm in our views that are well justified biblically rather than going with the crowd.
That's
And
good.
we've talked about Mark 15:15, wishing to please the crowd.
Hmm.
Pilate gave them Barabbas and had Jesus scourged and crucified. And that to me, that kind of Mark 15:15 mentality. You also read about it in Matthew 10. Jesus is giving warnings. Do not fear them. Do not fear them. Do not fear them. And I think that's a message for us now. We're going to have slimmer pickings. But what's really going to be important is just for us to stand tall and say, well, nevertheless, I see your point. I think you're mistaken. Here I stand. I can do no other.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
like that. I think we're moving into a period of the church's history. And I do not think that I will outlive this period of time of hardship. I think things aren't going to change for quite a long time. I'm just looking at the trends, not a prophet, but I'm just looking at the trends. And it means that we stand tall in the midst of the hardship.
Yeah. And that's what Christians have done for 2,000 years, and we can do our part now,
Absolutely.
can't we?
That's
All
right.
right. Well, Greg, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm gonna let you go, but everybody watching, stay on for a moment because I'm going to announce our book that we're gonna go through next time.
Well,
So,
I'm curious now.
well,
You
you
got
want to
my
stick around?
dander
You
up
can stay
about
with
that.
us. You
Yeah,
want to
sure.
stay
I'd
with us
just
while
like to
I?
hear that
Okay.
just for fun.
So what we'll tell you all is if you're watching on YouTube, you can join facebook.com/groups/ Alisa Childers Book Club. We will open up the group for 2 weeks for you to come on in. Then we're going to close it again. It's going to stay private the whole time, but we'll open it up for new members. And be sure that if you request membership, you answer the membership questions, because you will not be allowed in the group if you don't agree to the belief statement, which is just a very bare bones gospel. We're not going to fight about secondary issues, but just this is for real Christians seeking the gospel. And the group rules, got to agree to both those things. Come on in the group. And are you all ready? All right, the next book is going to be,
Oh my
yes,
goodness.
Thaddeus Williams, Confronting Injustice Without Compromising Truth. Oh, Greg, he's got it. He's ready. This is the book. We're doing this one.
Oh.
So for it, we'll open the club for 2 weeks. We will start reading this in 2 weeks. So if you want to join the group, what you want to do is go ahead and get this book now. Order it on Amazon. Get your book and your copy. And there's a little endorsement here on the back from someone named Alisa Childers. Pretty cool. It says, if you're a Christian concerned about oppression, injustice, racism, and other moral ills that plague our culture, there may not be a more important book you read this year. And I don't endorse books unless I mean it, and I mean it. So let's read through this one. I think this is going to promote a lot of really great conversation. So again, that's Thaddeus Williams, Confronting Injustice Without Compromising Truth. Thaddeus is excited to join us for his live stream at the end of the 6 weeks after we read this one. But for tonight, thank you all for joining us on Facebook and on YouTube. Greg, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you all next time.